In the depths of Five Nights at Freddy's lore, there's a story of an emotionally abusive parent returning home from their nightly activities. Probably drunk out of their mind, they storm through their house into the back room to confront someone they're living with. Someone who isn't supposed to lock his door, but he does it anyway. Ignoring the wishes of another member of the household, they just won't leave this person alone. In a fit of rage, they march to the back of their house to break in another way. To their dismay, the window to the room they're trying to get into has already been smashed, with footsteps trailing far beyond the backyard, into the darkness. Maybe it's the anger, maybe it's the drunken stupor. Whichever it is, this person is too arrogant to notice there's no glass shards on the outside of the window to indicate it was broken out of, nor do they seem to notice the large mascot footprint standing off to the side. This is the story of Midnight Motorist, and while its premise remains simple, it's largely agreed to be the biggest unsolved mystery of FNaF lore to this day. I'm not alone in this quest to solve this minigame. Just a simple search of Midnight Motorist, and you'll be bombarded with tons of theories from different sources, all trying to throw their own 2 cents onto the pile. For this reason, I'm certainly not going to claim that I'm going to solve Midnight Motorist in this video alone, but I hope my personal observations and perspectives can help push us closer to the truth than we've been getting. I'm going to handle this video similarly to my As It Was series, which you should totally watch, by the way. For those who haven't seen those videos, the premise is I'm going to lay out all of the facts first before we get to theorizing. To give credit where it's due, before I explain my personal opinions on what the story of the minigame is, there will be a segment where I cover more popular theories of the game's story from the rest of the community. Let's start with the facts. What is Midnight Motorist? On a technical level, Midnight Motorist is an arcade game you can buy for your pizzeria in the 6th FNaF game. On the surface, it's a simple racing game where the goal is to cross the finish line 4 times without crashing into other cars. On the last lap, however, a gap appears in the bottom of the screen. Driving through it gets us to the part of the game that really interests us. The music, perspective, and graphics change all at once. People who have looked in the files know the sub-game is called Later That Night. Now we're visibly a purple car driving down a winding road surrounded by trees. Astute observers may find a small clearing on the way down the road that is nothing but a rock or a mound of some kind. We'll get back to this later, but in the meantime, observe how our player character is visibly orange. Further down the road there's a junction. Turning right, or I suppose would be left from the player's perspective, brings our orange guy to the parking lot of a building simply labeled Juniors. Trying to enter the building causes you to be stopped by a green figure that tells us that we, quote, know that we can't be here, and shouldn't make this more difficult than it has to be. Returning to our car, the sounds of the rain begin to overtake the music as we make it to another clearing with a house at its center. Entering the house, we find someone in a chair wearing a gray shirt who's watching TV. The main character seems to pay no mind as it tells us that we should, quote, leave him alone tonight because he's had a rough day. We don't know who he is until we continue walking through the house to a back room. Our character then seems to furiously start banging on the door for some reason. It's clear this orange figure has some type of authority over whoever lives in this room, as he comments that the person inside is not supposed to lock the door. After pounding endlessly, the orange figure walks outside to the back of the house where we see a window that's been broken. It's notable that there are no visible glass shards on the outside of the window, cluing us in that the window must have been broken into, not out of, as the orange figure remarks that he ran off to that place again, and that he will be sorry when he gets back. Note that besides the footprints leading out of the window and into the darkness, there's a single set of 3-toed animal-looking footprints. These footprints are side by side and don't seem to have gotten close to the window. They just kind of stood there. So to lay everything out, here are the points of interest in this game. The orange guy, the person watching TV, the runaway, the mysterious rocker mound, Juniors, and the large mascot footprints. To run through some of the most common theories, I'll display a table of what all of these things are proposed to be. The most popular theory says that the orange man is William Afton, given they are driving a purple car. This theory states that William is driving home after the murder of Charlie, hence the title of Later That Night. Not only that, but the same rain effects are used in this game as are used in another minigame from FNaF 6 that shows Charlie dying in the rain one night. In this minigame, people have noticed the visible tire tracks nearby the crime scene. This also connects back to FNaF 2, where we see a purple man drive up outside in a purple car to kill a child before driving away. Continuing on, this theory states that Junior's is a bar, the green man is a bouncer for this bar, and William is banned from it due to drinking problems. This is pretty much the only agreed upon part of this minigame. The theory goes on to state that William killed Charlie because he was drunk at the time. Likely still drunk, William returns home to his family. This is where the theories start to diverge entirely. One theory claims that the person on the couch is Michael, as evidenced by his habit of watching TV in sister location, and the fact that he's wearing a gray shirt like he does in FNaF 4. The theory further states that the person in the back room is the crying child, and he's run off to Fredbear's. This theory starts to fall flat, however, due to the mascot footprints and the mysterious mound. While it's certainly plausible that the mound is Elizabeth's unmarked grave, if this minigame truly takes place the night Charlie died, from what we know, none of the main Freddy's cast should be possessed yet. So who do these footprints belong to? I mean, we know William wears the Spring Bonnie suit, but this theory says he's standing right here. If you can't tell, I have trouble following this theory, so let's move on to a new one. This next theory is a little bit more plausible. It states that the unmarked grave still belongs to Elizabeth, which would make sense as we know Elizabeth's death had to be covered up. It then goes on to say that the person in the chair is William's wife, and the person in the back is Mike. The footprints at his window belong to the ghost of Golden Freddy, possibly the crying child, which causes Mike to run off after it. There's just a few problems with this theory. If these footprints do belong to a ghost, well, actually, can ghosts even make footprints? Just going by the assumption that they can, why did the ghost appear outside and presumably break a window? Why wouldn't the ghost have just appeared in Michael's room? It doesn't make sense for these footprints to belong to anyone but a physical being, in my opinion. Another problem with this theory is it begs the question of where Mike would be running off to. Maybe the crying child's grave, sure. Some variations on this theory even claim that the mysterious mound is the crying child's grave. The biggest issue with that is we don't see anyone at this mound, nor do we see any footprints leading up to it. I mean, if you check behind the house even before you've knocked on the door, the footprints in the shadowed window are still present, so whatever's going on here has to have happened long before we got home. Another theory made by John from FNaF states that this mound belongs to a buried animatronic, namely Funtime Freddy, under the guise of Fredbear using an illusion disc, who goes up to the child's window to lure him out. This kind of connects back to the book Twisted Ones, where we see similar scenes of twisted animatronics emerging from the ground and using sound illusion discs to take on a different appearance. The problems with this theory are 1, Funtime Freddy has 4 toes and more square feet than round. Also, the footsteps don't even go up to the window, they just kind of stand there. Also, Occam's razor. This theory, in my opinion, has too many hoops to jump through to actually work. So what do I think is going on here? Well, it's important to keep in mind what Scott's mindset was while making this game. In his own words, this game was meant to tie up some remaining threads in the game's storyline by clarifying things from different points in the series. With that in mind, I feel it's safe to say that Midnight Motorist isn't trying to add anything new to the game's story in a substantial way. It's either supposed to clarify or give more details to something we already know about, and may have questions about. Let me start at the top. I don't think Midnight Motorist takes place directly after Charlie's death. Yes, I know that the tired tracks, the rain, and the fact the game is called Later That Night can all be seen as clues pointing to this fact. The problem though, as I've stated, is that if this truly is William, who just killed Charlie, the later parts of this minigame simply do not make sense. Hell, the very fact that supposedly William would be abusive towards the crying child, and Mike would be defensive of him, and the crying child would be running off to Fredbear's, directly contradicts what we know of these characters from 5. Here's what I do like of these series I've mentioned so far. I totally agree that the mound in the forest is Elizabeth's unmarked grave by the very fact her death had to be covered up. Also, I believe Junior's is a bar, and our orange guy is a drunkard. That all makes sense to me. I also believe in the idea from the earlier theory that at this point, the only Afton child remaining is Mike, and thus he's the runaway, on the account that this orange person must be an authority figure of some kind. But here's where things take a turn. Sure, I believe that the cast of Midnight Motorist is the Aftons, and I believe the purple car belongs to William. But where my theory differs from the rest is that I think William is actually on the chair watching TV, and the orange guy, well, that's the mother of the Afton children who's gone unseen this entire series. Let me explain. I've said it time and time again, but I feel this mound in the woods has to be Elizabeth's grave. The reasoning for this is simple. If we're to assume that this is the grave of an Afton child, let's look at why it's not the crying child's. Keep in mind, the Bite of 83 had several witnesses. Not only the 4 bullies, but also the other kids around town who claim that they'd be at the party throughout the minigames of FNAF 4. Furthermore, it's implied from the final minigame that the crying child didn't die in the restaurant. He died later, presumably in a hospital, given the flatline sound effect. Elizabeth, on the other hand, has no witnesses to her death, as told to us by Circus Baby and Sister Location. We also know from the Cancel Due to Leaks teaser that even though Elizabeth's death likely caused the closure of Circus Babies, the public was told it happened because of gas leaks. Nobody knows Elizabeth died that day except for the Aftons, so they had to bury her somewhere out of public view, in the middle of the woods. With that covered, let's cover the orange guy and the person in the chair. If Orange Guy truly is Mrs. Afton, as I claim them to be, this may track with the fact that she goes largely unseen throughout the entirety of the series. But it's simply, she's a distant parent, too caught up with drinking at places like Junior's to be involved with her children's lives. Also note that the Orange Guy seems to completely disregard the person on the couch. In the mind of an angry, drunk parent, I'd presume seeing one of your children just sitting down and watching TV may still cause them to be a target of your outrage, especially if you've had a stressful day. The fact that they totally disregard them, though, clues me in that they must be someone Orange Guy doesn't have authority over, being the other parent. Furthermore, Orange Guy says that this is their house. In Security Breach, the table of staff bots emulating the Aftons has the mother sitting at the head of the table, not the father. It's important to keep in mind that Scott has gone on record to say he tries to clarify things in past games by putting clues into newer games. Speaking of the person in this chair, let me explain why I think this is William. All we have to go off of is a simple scene of them watching TV, and their one spoken line doesn't give us much information other than they're likely trying to protect the person in the back for some reason. But I think this information may be all we need to put together the story here. Note the gray shirt and the gray text. This may seem like a direct callback to Michael in FNAF 4. By comparing the colors, you may find that they're just barely different from one another. The blue wallpaper and the TV still match from Sister Location though, so why am I claiming that this person who very clearly parallels Mike is actually William? Going back to Sister Location, there are very clear themes of resemblance between Michael and William. Mike literally becomes a purple guy like his father at the end of the game, and he outright states in his ending monologue that the animatronics mistook him for his father, giving a chuckle as if this comparison is something he's heard his whole life.
They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
Now, more compelling are the scenes that actually take place in front of the TV in Sister Location. The show, The Immortal and the Restless, follows the story of a father who bears a striking resemblance to his child, but he tries to deny the similarity. Looking back at the chair guy, I think this makes the FNAF 4 comparison all the more compelling. The colors resemble each other strongly, but are just barely different. Alright, so now begs the question, what's going on in the backyard? For anyone who read mystery books as a kid, you may know the basic tropes of detective work in Sherlock Holmes books, for example. One of the most popular ones is which side of the window the broken glass can be found on. As I've said multiple times, we see absolutely no glass on the outside of the window, seemingly indicated this window was broken into. This leads us to the footprints, which seem to be facing the window. For some reason, it didn't walk up to the window to smash it. It did so from a distance, remaining motionless. Going back to our detective tropes, isn't it weird that the person in the chair seems to have no idea that any sort of break-in occurred? I mean, shattering glass isn't exactly quiet. The point I'm getting at here is chair guy, being William Afton, is responsible for this entire predicament. I propose that these footprints belong to one of his spring Bonnie suits. The 3 toes match on all of them, but notice also that these footprints are standing in front of a bush, looking almost as if whatever this thing was stepped directly out of the bush. If these footprints belong to one of William's costumes, it's very possible he had a spare stashed somewhere near his house. Perhaps this is even the costume that was incorporated into his scrap trap appearance. It's worth noting that the orange guy claims that the runaway has run off to that place again, implying that 1, this is a regular occurrence, and 2, this person holds some type of disdain to wherever this person's running off to. To fully explain what I think Midnight Motorist is, now that I have all of the evidence laid out, Let me tell it to you in the form of a story. After yet another evening spent drinking her life away in a bar as a means to cope with losing two of her children due to her husband's line of work, Mrs. Afton has a much longer way home tonight, given the closest bar, Junior's, has her band. Returning home, she tries to take out her frustration on her son, as she normally does. On the way to the door, her husband asks that she leave him alone tonight. What Miss Afton doesn't know is William isn't covering for Mike. He's covering for himself. He doesn't need her involved with his business with Mike. Walking around her house to the backyard, she finds footprints leading off to the distance. He's run off, again. Where he could be going is beyond her, but William knows exactly where Mike's gone off to. For the past few nights, he has spent some time standing outside of Mike's window in costume as a means of threatening him to do his bidding. Specifically and more speculatively, I believe in these nights, Mike is being ordered to go to the FNaF 4 test chambers, unless he wants his family to be murdered as per William's threat. As an aside, keep in mind that FNaF 4's gameplay isn't endless. The nights always begin at 12 and end at 6, implying whoever's here isn't stuck here permanently. It's more like they have a duty to be here each night. On this night in particular, there was a problem. When time came to threaten Mike, it was beginning to rain, which made wearing the costume a risky play. For the sake of efficiency, William threw the costume on, threw a nearby rock into Mike's window to really get his attention, and then quickly took off the costume once Mike had gone away, stashing the suit in the bush. The problem now is there was evidence of what he had done with the broken window. He knew tonight he needed to try to steer his wife away from the crime scene. To his dismay, she discovered it anyway, but thankfully she didn't pay much mind to it other than Mike's footprints. So yeah, that's my take on Midnight Motorist. I think the only thing left that I need to explain is why I specifically think Mike was sent to the FNaF 4 chambers. As I said, this minigame was put into a game made to answer questions from the past games. The question I think being answered here, or at the very least is being set up, is how Mike got into the FNaF 4 test facility. As I mentioned in my sister location video, people did figure out the whole test chamber thing back when the game released. But over time, the theory was largely forgotten. But more compelling, one other open thread this game intentionally leaves is the name of the fifth dead child, an answer revealed in the security logbook, which released later that month. Another piece of information given in that book is a sketch of Nightmare Fredbear. Knowing the book belonged to Mike, this tells us that he somehow saw the nightmare animatronics. Connecting back to Midnight Motorist, we know how that came to be. Being honest, I don't know if I'm entirely right. On one hand, I think people are certainly on the right track with the idea that Midnight Motorist is later in the night that Charlie died. While it's true that that take confuses things, I feel like there has to be some way for that to be the case. But even still, I think the theory may still have its warrants. It gives us an answer to the whereabouts of Mrs. Afton and how Mike got involved with FNaF 4, if I am correct. In the end, I really just wanted to throw a new idea out there to get people thinking. Now that I have my solution out in the open, I can finally begin working on the As It Was for Pizzeria simulator. Speaking of which, you can click here to go to the playlist of the series. The first couple of episodes have audio issues, and I may go back to revoice them sometime, but for now, that's all I have. So I'll see you all next time.